please take a look at the chat and the information we have about all the organizations and initiatives and learn more. Bring your Rotary clubs or your organizations or your individual self to some of this work that I'm sure moves you as much as it moves me. Huge appreciation to the presenters for sharing this incredible work they do to empower girls. We have about 15 minutes for a Q&A now. I know the team has been collecting questions in the chat. Please put any other additional questions you have in the Q&A function. That helps us weed out and see those questions. And please note that Elizabeth Yusevich is still here and also available for questions. And I'm actually going to lob the first one to Elizabeth. There was a question about what is Rotary able to do or doing about women and girls in Ukraine. Of course, an issue that is filling the newspapers and sound waves right now and on all of our minds among the many refugee crises and situations of violence in the world. But Elizabeth, Ukraine.
Yes, and I'm glad you asked about that. There are clearly girls and women at risk since they are forming the majority. I believe the statistics are still at about 2/3 of the refugees are women and children. They are actually, some of them prefer to be referred to as displaced because it is their intention and hope that they will return to their homeland. Rotary has done an amazing job to mobilize assistance for displaced people from the Ukraine. And that has come together through our global network, but also the districts in countries that border Ukraine, specifically Moldova and Poland have been very active, but other countries in Eastern Europe as well. There is, you may know, also a disaster response and disaster relief fund through the Rotary Foundation. It is possible to make donations to that fund that are specific to Ukraine. And so working with the Rotary Foundation staff, Rotary International staff, and those district leaders in those districts, those funds are being designated for support and for prevention and for rehabilitation of women and girls who need that help, in addition to other refugee services. I personally have been monitoring the activities of those clubs, and in neighboring countries, my heritage is Lithuanian. I've been watching what the Lithuanian district has been doing. The outpouring and the support from those Rotary districts is phenomenal. So there is a great deal of activity that is going on. That will become more and more visible over the next several weeks, but rest assured that those Rotary colleagues in Eastern Europe are doing just an extraordinary job of supporting, as are the people of countries like Poland and Moldova.
Okay, I had one
Thank
thing
you
to
so
that
much.
on it. We just to show how Rotary works, John Huco had all the action groups on a call the other day to talk about how we can engage. So even though we work on certain issues, we're all partnering together to help the crisis. So appreciate Rotary and their leadership on that.
Right, and of course, the issue of trafficking is also also critical in Ukraine and what's happening on the border as well. So thank you so much, Elizabeth. If you could stay on for just one more sort of question, I'm sure there will be more, but one that I have here. There were a couple questions about the empowering girls projects that Rotary is doing and how Rotarians and perhaps others can actually see some of the projects that are happening around the world. And I do want to say, just I know in the Q&A there are a number of good projects that people are putting information about. Please put that in the chat. We will not have time today to spotlight any other projects, but Elizabeth will let you know how to really put some of these Empowering Girls projects into the showcase that Rotary has available. So I'll leave that to you.
Thank you. And I am so heartened to see the number of projects that have been entered into the chat, and I encourage you to continue entering them. And if you have not entered your project in Rotary Showcase, please do. That is the way that we show globally the kind of impact that we can have. You do need to log into My Rotary in order to access Showcase, but you can enter your project there, and you can designate other people from your club as well, who can then go in and update your project. Currently, when you search on Rotary Showcase by a specific topic or by the hashtag Empowering Girls 2021, you will get served up results for up to 200 projects. That's just for ease of use, but there are thousands of projects in Showcase. And so definitely, if you have not already entered your project in Showcase, please do. It really does help us demonstrate not only to ourselves, but to partners like UNICEF, that we have a global reach and we are very serious about the needs of girls around the world.
Thanks so much. And Sean, a member of this extraordinary team who put this webinar together, has put some information in the chat about how to put your project on Rotary Showcase. So please do that. I'm just looking at all these great projects in the Q&A and wishing we had time.
Just quickly, Anna, if anyone is interested and wants more information, if you go to the Presidential Initiatives page, just enter into the search Presidential Initiatives. There are a list of resources, including how to put your project on Showcase on that page that are relevant to empowering girls.
Great, thank you. Now, Maria and Dr. Rambolkas, there have been a couple questions and comments about taking Crown Her beyond Trinidad and Tobago. I know right now you are still very focused on implementing this legislation in Trinidad and Tobago, but do you see this as a model that other countries and Rotary clubs could perhaps take it elsewhere? I see there's interest in Kenya and in other places. What kind of advice do you have for others who are interested in this? And are you interested in partnering internationally?
We are very much interested in partnering internationally. We are trying to mirror our laws because Scotland is the first country in the world that made all menstrual products free for all their women. So we want to be close to what Scotland model is like. So we want all women to be equal, especially when they have to work or go to school. We want them to participate with dignity. We want them to have an economic ease of burden. So it would be very interesting if the entire world could get on board and have menstrual equity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I do understand. I had a quick look. So someone asked about period poverty in the United States. And in one study in 2021, 14.2% of women in the US have experienced period poverty in a year. And period products are expensive. I think that was said also in your presentation. In the US, they are actually taxed and they cannot be purchased with food stamps, Medicaid, or health insurance. So those are areas I think to work on policy levels with Rotarians and Rotary clubs in the US as well. This is a problem that is experienced around the world. Thank you so much. Neil, there are a couple questions here about involving men and boys in some of this work, and you specifically mentioned that in your presentation. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you do that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's really just a program we're designing right now. So I don't have a lot of the details, but what we found is that by including boys in the training of menstrual hygiene, they become more sympathetic to the girls and actually more supportive of them in those challenging times. And the best example is, instead of ridiculing them and teasing them for the situation the girls are in, they actually find ways to support them. So the intention is, by raising that awareness among schoolboys, that we can make a difference.
Thank you so much. I just want to add something to that, is that tomorrow I'm actually involved in the UN Rotary Day with UNICEF, and I'm doing a panel on preventing child marriage. And on that panel is a gentleman who is head of the He for She campaign of UN Women. And this is an opportunity, a website with a lot of resources about how men and boys can become champions to empower girls and women. So perhaps Sean will just put that website, it's He for She .org, and it's a campaign of the UN with a lot of resources, educational opportunities, campaigns, and demonstrations and case studies around the world about how men and boys can support empowering women. Thank you so much. Neil, there was one more question that I thought maybe you are best positioned to answer about how do you reach the poor in a population? So that is in many ways, those of us who have done development work, we know it's sometimes very hard to reach marginalized or very poor populations who have the need of many of the services that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually went into that as we were building the program. We worked with the community leaders to say we're going to go target, and even the community leaders said we want to target the poor folks with this program. We want to target the poor people in our communes. And we jumped in the truck with these leaders and started driving around. And within 15 minutes, they all kind of realized that they didn't have any way of knowing. You couldn't just drive and see. So what we did is went back to a systematic approach and just said, look, we want everyone to have access. And so we use smartphone technology to capture data on where there is water and where there's access and where there isn't access, and use that spatially to define who does and who doesn't. And the idea being that if we can create a water point that's clean and functional, every house within 500 meters can use that. And girls, they can access that within 30 minutes. It doesn't need to impact girls going to school or going to work or anything else like that. So it's really not specifically targeting the poor, but targeting access for everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And lots of interesting comments and examples in the chat as well. As a former Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic, I feel particularly committed and connected to your work. So thank you so much for all that you are doing for the Isle of Hispaniola. I'm going to turn to Dave now. There are a couple questions here that I think are to him. I have one about prevention. I'm very interested in learning a little bit more about the work that you're doing to prevent. You gave us one example, but I would love to hear that more. And then we had two specific questions in the Q&A, which you've probably seen, but what does it mean for a person to be trafficked for 2 months? I think that's connected directly to the story that you told us. And then the question of, are boys trafficked as well?
Yeah, so I'll start with the boys. I get that question quite a bit. Obviously, today is about empowering girls, but yes, boys are trafficked as well, particularly on labor. If you look at a lot of countries in the brick factories in India, for instance, in the meager population in China, boys are trafficked producing solar panels and batteries and things like that. So boys are definitely trafficked. They typically, when it comes to the United States in particular, they don't self-identify as well, particularly when it comes to sex trafficking, so you don't hear about that. And unfortunately, there's not as many programs as we would like, but we're seeing more and more. A lot of the scalable programs for women can actually be scaled, or girls can be scaled up for boys and men as well. So, but it's definitely an area that affects both boys, men, and girls and women as well. And then as far as prevention goes, we believe prevention is the key to everything when it comes to trafficking, not just education on school system, but education in the community. Because if you don't know what's happening, like for me, for instance, I didn't know what was happening in 2012, and I learned about it, have really given my life to it. And so many Rotarians that I've talked to around the country have done the same thing. And we're doing education prevention in all forms. We're doing legislation. We work quite closely with legislators around the world. We actually were instrumental in the End Modern Slavery Act in Australia, and as well as the one here in the United States. And so we work on that quite closely. We work with educating and prevention with police departments, do training with them as well. So that's another area. And your third question was, what was the third question?
Somebody wanted to understand what it meant to be, when you, in your story, you mentioned that a young woman was trafficked, or a girl was trafficked for 2 months. And that sounds like it could be harrowing, but if you could give us a few more understanding of what that actually means.
Yeah, so in other words, she was basically lured out. A lot of times people think of trafficking as always kidnapped, and that's usually not the case in many cases. In most cases, it's fraud, coercion, manipulation. And in this case, this person pretended to be her boyfriend. And he ended up, once he lured her out from her home, he ended up having her, selling her to other people, trafficked to other people for 2 months. And again,
and when you say selling, you mean for sex, just
for
so we're
sex.
all clear.
That's
Yes.
correct. She
Yeah.
was
Okay.
she was sold for sex. And again, it was a situation where she thought it was a boyfriend. He coerced her and manipulated her. And then by the time she realized what was happening, it was too late, and the mom couldn't get a hold of her. And so that's kind of the traditional picture of what trafficking looks like.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Mhm.
Dawn or Kim, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Can you take a look at the chat? I haven't had a chance to look at it. And is there one or two more that we can pass to our panelists?
There is a question. Are there any programs that help with the girls and women to overcome the psychological damage caused by these struggles and the struggles they experience emotionally?
So Dave, I might go back to you for that
Sure.
one. And if any of the other panelists want to jump in as well, that's great. Elizabeth, you might have examples from around the world on mental health as well, but we'll start with Dave.
Yeah, the one program I'll just mention, there's many programs that are doing great work, but one that we've worked with quite extensively is in Atlanta called Wellspring Living, and they do a holistic approach where the girls will come into a facility and they're treated for, it could be drug addiction, it could be mental health, it could be all sorts of issues dealing with their health, and they work with them, they give them restoration and then eventually jobs. But there are many programs we work, one of our coordinators actually is in Hawaii, Jessica Muniz, it does amazing work when it relates to help and support survivors. And we actually have a list of a lot of those facilities on our website as well.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth, I'm sure there are some other examples from across the world.
Well, there are examples from around the world, and they are primarily initiated by partner organizations of Rotary clubs. And, I think that as Dave has pointed out, right now, so much of the focus is on rehabilitation and reorientation of women and girls who have been victims of human trafficking. And we also are starting to see clubs get engaged with organizations that are working on prevention. And in both of these elements, the rehabilitation, reintegration, and the prevention of human trafficking, there is a mental wellness and well-being element. But again, I think this is one of those areas where we have tremendous volunteer mobility through our Rotary clubs. And by partnering with the right organizations, we can address those issues of mental wellness. And I think Dave has pointed that out as well.
Thank you so much to all of the panelists. There's just, the chat is full of great information, other resources, organizations working on this. So really a rich list and network of organizations and projects. Thank you so much to all of the participants who have been adding and who are also active in this area of empowering girls.